This is House Planning Help, episode 303. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build. I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is David Arrenberg. He took on the role of project manager for his build, and we're going to find out why he chose this route, what it entailed, and was it the right move? So those of you that might have listened to this podcast for getting on for a few years now may remember the UK Passive House Awards and my involvement. I have been out and filmed a lot of the video inserts for the UK Passive House Awards, and it's back again for another year. So very excited to get out on a few more sites, hear some stories, and try and make some really interesting videos to promote Passive House. But obviously I've built my own Passive House since the last time the awards went round, and I was quite keen to enter. Well, why not? Might as well. The only thing is that this is different to every other awards. Every other awards probably in housing, best granite worktop, most windows in the house or something. This is an as-built award. So is the house actually doing what we thought? Is it energy efficient? Have you got the numbers to show it all? So I thought that's fine, because you just have to go in search of that information until I started to collate it, which obviously energy is the first thing. And back in the day, we chose gas, which I wouldn't do now, but that's the route we went down. So I had to gather together some bills from our gas company. And as it turned out, our meter had been broken for quite a long time. How, we didn't know, because they frequently say, oh yeah, what's the number that's written on there? And then we'd go out and we'd write down the number, and then that would all be done. But the thing is, the number wasn't changing. I remember when the guy came out to fix it, I said to him, so what is wrong with it? Why is it broken? This is a brand new connection here. Oh, the dial stopped turning. Right, glad I asked. That's really useful bit of information. Why have we still got these dials? Anyway, so that route didn't really work. The other thing is we have all these sensors around the house, because I've just been interested, what's the humidity, what is the temperature? And then I discovered that all of these sensors are great for the moment. So they'll tell you what is happening at exactly that time, but they're not logging anything. You don't plug them into a computer. So clearly I got the wrong sensors there. So I think this is building up to getting a podcast where we tell you what are the best ways to monitor your house so that you have something physical to show. Maybe I'll be in the awards next time round. I'll give it a go then. The consolation prize is that my production company, Regen Media, back filming those videos, visiting all the sites. So that's going to be an honour yet again. Looking forward to that. Let's get to our featured interview. I must say a thank you to architect Kirsty Maguire, first of all, because that's how this episode came about. I can't even really remember the details other than we were chatting on Twitter, and I'd been looking for someone I wanted to focus on project management in an episode. And Kirsty said, well, one of my clients, David, has just done a really good job. So she put me in touch, and that's what's happening right now. We're having a chat with him about his project. I started by asking David to tell me a little bit about where he was building.
Okay, so we're up in Dundee in Scotland, near Ninewells Hospital, which is a big old 60s built hospital. Just beside it, there's an enclave, a woodland, which surrounds a really old house called Invergary House, which has been extended over the years and is a 3-story sort of turrets on the corners type grand house, and that's split into flats, and my mum lives in the top one of those. So that is how we acquired the land, really. So we live in the woodland at the bottom of that.
And what did you decide to build there?
So yeah, I suppose most people have a dream to build a house and then they go and find the land, but we sort of had the land and decided to build the house. So it was, maybe the dream to build a house wasn't there, but when my dad was alive and lived here in the house, we discussed it, and it was a bit of a pipe dream when you're young, and he didn't really have the money to do it. So it was all a bit of a sort of discussion and a bit of, that would be nice if you could do that. So once I got married and had a bit more cash, I thought, let's do it. The land belonged to my auntie, who moved away from Dundee about 15 years ago. And I maintained the land with my dad. And then since he's died, I maintained it. So she eventually said, if you want to build a house, look into it. That's the sort of backstory.
Well, we're going to talk a bit about project management today because we've heard that you've done a very good job on this from Kirsty. So when did this first enter the frame of you were going to be project manager?
Well, from the very start. So I am a project manager now at Scottish Water. I was just a civil engineer previously.
Oh, no wonder you've done a good job. Right. I didn't know that bit. Quite an important part of the puzzle.
I mean, I was only just getting into project management at the start of the build. But it's not that complicated. A profession, if you like, being organised, making sure you know the order of things. That's it.
As a professional, then, what skills does a project manager have?
Yeah, well, I look at programs every day. I understand that you need space in programs, time, risk time, allowances with money as well. We have a good appreciation of what things might cost, what things might delay. A little bit of contract stuff, although we didn't have a contract with the builder in the end of any particular type. We sort of went freestyled it because Craig's Eco were a trustworthy bunch. We had a sort of arrangement where you could go to a tribunal if things went wrong, but no official contract. So, yeah, understanding the risk really is the big thing.
Did you get any training, go on any courses or anything beforehand? How did you bridge that from your job to project managing a house?
Indeed. Well, I've had lots of different types of training. It's like at these big companies, you get contract training and relationships training and things like that, all the stuff that might come into play when you're dealing with people and money and health and safety. And I actually thought this was quite easy compared to a big multifunctional water job. The only key difference is it was your own money rather than a large part of the government's money. So, yeah, the sort of logistics of this, I thought was pretty easy. It's about a giant shed, isn't it? A giant insulated shed. I wouldn't be scared of it even if I wasn't a project manager. You break it down into its parts and it's not too bad.
Before anything happened on the project then, what tasks were you doing? How did you get going?
Well, specifically, I got going because it's a woodland and a mature woodland at that, where the house was going needed to be cleared. So I was a labourer for about 2 years while we got finance in place and changed title deeds over and things from my auntie, which all took an inordinate amount of time and a decent bit of money as well, which was quite frustrating. But I spent that time clearing trees and planning what sort of house we might build, looking at magazines, looking at the internet and trying to think about how you would do this. But really, you were focusing on planning at that point and what we needed to do for that.
And what did they allow to happen when it comes to getting permission and the go-ahead? Was it clear or did you have to go back and forth a bit?
Yeah, we looked through the rules. There was a lot of hiccups. We had to be a certain distance away from the big house, Invergary House, which is A-listed. So there was a rule there. I think it was 150 metres you had to be away in order to develop. We're overlooking houses as well. So there's some issues there with overlooking, which is a specific thing. Working in a woodland, we had to consider the health of the trees. So we had to start thinking about the working areas and how we would actually get a driveway down through the woodland without damaging tree roots. And we were given a specialist guy, arborist, who we had to pay and employ to oversee the whole thing from start to finish. He even needed to help me put together a woodland maintenance plan for the future as part of the planning. So that was probably the most awkward part of the planning. Actually designing the house, popping it down, and they didn't have too many problems with that. But yeah, the woodland was certainly the key thing for the council.
Tell us about the team then that you're bringing on board, because there's always this, well, I know I'm going to project manage, but the design process, who we're going to have on site, the pot of money, how did you juggle all of these factors?
Yeah, well, we want to build a passive house, so we want to go down that route. We weren't sure whether it was feasible or We had the money to do it, so we had to get Kirsty on board pretty quickly. Being a good architect, she was also capable in project management, so between us, we muddled through. Yeah, so she got on board pretty early, and we started going for outline planning was the initial phase. Testing the council to see, is this okay, and what would you need? So that was all part of the stuff I was talking about woodland, and that's when we started to find out the issues that might exist.
And then your budget for this, how did you set that? And did you want to borrow money? Was it easy to secure money?
Yeah, so again, we were quite fortunate in that we were capable of borrowing money against Jenny's business. She owns half of a dental practice, so we borrowed about half the money through that, and then got half of the money. And this, not to put anyone off, I think you could have gone down the borrowing from a company route, but we just managed to avoid it. I had some money from the sale of a flat in Glasgow. Jenny had a little bit of money, and then we muddled together basically. So we didn't have to borrow formally.
And how did you set that number then?
Just by area. I mean, once we spoke to Kirsty, after a lot of to and fro in between us and her about how much a passive house might cost, obviously you have to put a bit of risk in there. So I think it was 17 or 1800 quid a square metre. So that allowed us to set the budget based on what we thought we had, or we could accumulate. We planned for 300,000 for the build, and I think it ended up 315 in total, but that was for everything, and that's landscaped as well and includes architect fees and everything. So that's the whole kit and caboodle.
When you mention architect's fees, what package are you getting from Kirsty? Is she coming the whole way, or how did you split that? Obviously, you're doing the project management.
Yeah, no, well, given it was passive house and she had good experience, it was sensible to keep her on all the way. So she did the outline planning, then the detailed design. Well, even before outline planning, we were doing design drawings. She was showing us models, and very interesting process involving us fully. The whole process was all design. She had a good ideas, and we took them on board, but she also took on our thoughts. And yeah, we had a very good relationship with Kirsty. So that went all the way through to the end. And then we left her after the outline planning, and the planning was done. Once we'd got that through, I worked with Craig Zico, which was the contractor after that. And Kirsty just input on a sort of ad hoc basis where we were struggling with one of our details or small issues with the plant room size and stuff. Yeah.
When you're working with your contractor, are they handling the whole project, or are there bits that fall in between, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I don't know. You've got approaches there, how you contract them, whether you get them to do everything and get all their subcontractors, or whether you get more involved. I got a bit more involved in that. Craig Zico were happy to have a sort of open book policy, is what we were calling it anyway. Basically, give me a full bill of quantities for every item, broken down really well into every sort of part, plumbing, slab laying, founds, everything. And within reason, I could bring in my own people if I could get it cheaper, basically. He was happy to incorporate that. Although with the risk there being that if I delayed another part of the works with my subcontractor, then, they could be liable for some additional costs. So, yeah, that was a good way of doing it, I thought, because being a local man and Craig Zico weren't as local to Dundee, I had some good contacts. I subbed in quite a lot.
How did you actually get that breakdown in the first place? Is that a quantity surveyor?
Wojtek, who was he was the project I don't know what his official title was, but he was the sort of site manager. Site manager is the best description. He did everything. He did all their accounts, all their payments. So quite a small firm in that way. Yeah, so he presented it and we went back and forth. I asked for more detail here and there, and eventually we agreed on a sort of list. And then I said, I'm going to bring in my own plumber if that's okay. Okay, that's fine.
So finding these subcontractors, you want to bring in your own plumber. Do you know this plumber? How are you sourcing the plumber?
Scott was Jenny's cousin, so that was easy enough. I mean, this is what we're talking about. The Sparky was Jenny's mum's electrician. She runs a quarry over in Cotside Quarry in Carnoustie. Her mum does, so she had masses of contacts for materials and concrete construction, everything. She works with lots and lots of companies, so she was very useful. And we used her Sparky. He was a good guy, Kyle. I made sure that I knew these people would, fit in with others and they were good to work with and they weren't awkward characters. You never know. When you're trying to get them into a team like Craig's Eco, you don't want them coming in and causing problems. So you're careful with that, I suppose.
Would they say, I need these things on site, I'm going to turn up on this date, and then you'd have to do some shopping, or how would it work?
Yeah, so Wojtek, again, he did arrange a lot of it. But yeah, let's say Scott was doing the plumbing. He did everything for the plumbing. So he would arrange the materials, turn up on site and do it at the exact time I told him. And he's family, so he had no choice. Kyle was in and out a lot. You know what electricians are like. They come one day and the plasterboard isn't up correctly, or they have to go away and come back and be flexible a little bit. So he was okay with that. The other thing I did was quite good. I did a lot of the negotiating for materials. So Wojtek would put his price down for materials. And again, if I could get the materials cheaper, he was happy to substitute them in. So particularly for I think the biggest one was the zinc. So you've seen pictures, obviously, of the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's black. The black stuff is zinc. And there's a lot of it. And I think the first quote I got was something like 105,000 to clad not even all of the house. So it includes the roof. But
that must have been a fun moment.
Yeah, Kirsty, what's the idea here with zinc? You know what I mean? You told us that it's fair enough, it's sustainable, it can be recycled, but right now I don't really care. Let's just get some corrugated iron or something. Because yeah, I think the final quote, once we'd gone round about every company, well, I'd gone round every company in the UK, we got it for 55, so about half the cost.
That is just madness then. So what do you think was the difference? Were you paying for something different? Was it the same product? Were they just trying it on?
So you do, yeah. I'm not an absolute expert here, and I'm trying to rack my memory. You do get different products, but the guarantees on them are long. I think it's 20 years anyway, but realistically, I can't see us ever having to do anything with the zinc. But I have no idea why the first one was 100 odd grand. I think the average was maybe more like 70, 75, something like that. So yeah, HL Metals down in Ayrshire I don't know whether they wanted the job more than the other guys.
Yes.
They were a bit closer than some of them. So the journey time wasn't too bad, but I can't give you a definitive answer on that one, other than to say distance is probably one of them.
Were there any challenges in sourcing anything, or was it similar to that pattern of the cladding that you just keep going until you find something at a price that you consider is a good price?
Well, that was one of the first things that I'd negotiated, because obviously we needed that ready and we needed it programmed in and the company on board. So once you get a saving of that level, you get addicted to it a little bit. So I found myself being quite harsh, going back and forwards between flooring suppliers and stuff. They've just undercut you. Can you do any better? And the amount of money you can save is insane. You're not bullying them. You're not big enough to bully them. You're only one house. So they're clearly still making profits. But I think in terms of management, that was the key thing, money-wise.
What tips would you have on that front for negotiating and trying to get a best price? Was it simply a case of, I've just gone down the road and he said this?
Yeah, well, it's not really project management negotiation like I do in work. That's more just arguing with contractors over the prices is one thing. But this is, just having the balls, really. Just say it as it is. It depends on your character, I guess, if you're willing to do that. But usually when it's your own money and maybe you're watching the sort of overall budget, I was monitoring the overall budget like a hawk. You know, anything went up, it went into a spreadsheet, got added in. I looked at the overall total and thought, oh God, we've got to save somewhere else. And then something would come down. So it was a constant balance. So when you're doing that and it's your own money, yeah, you've got a bit more enthusiasm when it comes to going and asking for discounts.
So would you say you were almost more motivated because it was your own project compared to a work one? I obviously don't want you to get in trouble with your work, but do you know what I mean? You've got that personal involvement.
Oh, I've no problem saying that, 100%, yeah. You're doing it once, it's your house, you're going to live in it. You don't want to, hinder yourself with a load of debt that you can't afford. So when you say something's your budget, try and stick to it, and hopefully that'll set you in good stead.
So a lot of the time, did you know this particular item was expensive, or was it just a case of I can get 20% off all of these things, so I should just work my way down?
Well, as I say, we had the list at the start. Wojtek had given us a lot of his already agreed prices with things, and he had a good idea of what things cost even when he didn't have a guaranteed price. So because you had that start, you could see what things cost. And anyway, in your head, a kitchen's going to could cost you 40 grand, or you can get a second-hand one for free and install it yourself. So everything has room for adjustment. So yeah, I just attacked the things that I thought were movable in terms of price and would continue to keep the quality up. Yeah, because you don't want to give up on quality on everything.
And did everything arrive when you needed it to arrive?
I'm thinking back, and the big stuff like the crane coming in for the really important key milestones, if you want to use a project management phrase, or the key items, they were all good. The one issue we had was the track down to the Invergary house, which we used to get down to our house, is a lot smaller than it should be, really. I think it's only barely 3 meters wide. So we had a big issue with things arriving at the very, very top and being 300 meters away without any method of getting them down. So we did at one point have a nice little forklift going around helping us, but yeah, there were some hairy moments at 6 a.m. when something's arriving, and I'm thinking, I'm just going to have to get this on the car roof one by one. Some delivery driver who's driven all the way from Bristol or something needs to get home.
This was some of the falling between the gaps question that I was asking earlier, that can't get down to the site or storing the things when it suddenly falls back to you, or even just cleaning up the site.
Oh, well, yeah, cleaning up the site was always a good one for us because I wasn't directly involved in a lot of the actual construction work, but you can help a lot by keeping everything tidy and clean, and making sure people can get in and out. I mean, there's the issue with the track. We did know about it, and we used to give them the dimensions and say that, could you use a small truck and things, but these things get lost over the phone or over the internet when you're ordering things. So yeah, Arctic's turning up.
Did you have any challenges with any of the trades? A lot of them seem to be quite well known to you, but was there ever a case where you'd have to say, that work isn't good enough, or, even kick someone off site?
I think with everything, with the meat of the house, it was okay. So the plumbing, the electrical work, the joinery was absolutely beautiful. The guys that did that were a couple of great lads. Wojtek obviously is of Polish descent. He's second generation now, but he still used Polish guys for some of it. The two guys who did the joinery, and they built it as on the once the foundation slab was down, they just built these panels straight on top of that based on good drawings, and then the crane came in and they slotted into place. I couldn't believe it. We watched it with this big crane, just slotted them into place beautifully. They were up ladders, knocked them together. It took about an hour and a half. It was incredible. So yeah, the meat of the house, everything was great. The zinc contractor, again, a couple of old boys that were just getting on with it, and the freezing cold as well. and just producing these beautiful finishes. So all that was good. I think the problems came, as you were asking about problems, with the finishing. And there was maybe a little bit of a two-way street there because we were saving costs we only did taping, we didn't do full plaster of the whole house. It's getting towards the end, so maybe some of the money is running out a little bit. And, the main contractor, you're starting to eat into his potential profits if you get them to do too much for what they've agreed. So, yeah, some of the finishes aren't as superb as you maybe would have hoped for.
Is there anything that you took on board yourself, or were you quite good at staying in the project management lane?
Well, I definitely kept away from doing. You can't go as fast. You can't do as good a job. I had all this stuff. There's 3 acres of land around here, so I've done all the turfing and the slab laying and more basic jobs for someone who isn't as skilled as these guys. These guys, when they're painting or doing the joinery, are just 3-4 times as fast as you. So for me, we needed a house. I mean, talking about number one child was born as the foundation was going in. So there was a bit of a need to get a shift on and get it done. I do appreciate folk that take a lot on themselves, though, but maybe at my age, I'm not quite as skilled as you might be when you get into your 50s and 60s, and maybe you've got a bit more skill like that. My dad was a builder. I did work with him, so I know the basics, but in the end, I think it was the way to save money was by negotiating prices, not labouring in the end.
Have you ever thought about how much money you've saved over the whole project, or is it just guesswork?
I think I reckon it's probably 50, 60 grand, that sort of. Well, I don't know. You could come and see the house, and it depends if you're talking about the overall, how much you think this house would be to buy. If you're talking about doing it as a self-build, as opposed to buying this house new, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of pounds. This house is, I don't know what it'd be valued at. We got an arbitrary valuation on it for the mortgage, so we could get a mortgage to pay back a little bit of the money that Jenny's dad gave us, and they valued it at 550. So we spent 315 building it, and that's where they're valuing it. But I don't know. We're never going to move anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Well, it's always a nice thing, though, isn't it, to be in that range, though, where your investment of time has actually equaled some money as well. And while we're talking about investment of time, how much time was going into this? Were you on site the whole time? How did you get that time away from work?
Yeah, so the time thing's an interesting one because your enthusiasm takes over and you're not quite sure. But every night you're sitting there. But it's not a painful. I didn't find it painful anyway. I found it all quite exciting. So I think per week, if you like, during the build was quite high. You're putting probably 20, 30 hours a week extra, just thinking about things and making phone calls and things. Before that was the plan, and it was a bit on and off. You were spending a lot of time waiting for other people doing things, so it wasn't so intense, but still on your mind, of course. You're thinking about these things, and it was good to be really young, so we're lucky. We're young folks, so we're in an enviable position here in sort of mid-30s to do something like this. Not everyone has that opportunity, so stress doesn't really come into it at that age. You're a lot of energy, I think.
It's a particularly nice thing when you've got kids who are growing up, so they get this fantastic base. And I really think when they're young is the easiest time to build. It probably doesn't feel like it, but
well, yeah, she was 0 when we were building it. She was 1 by the time we went in, or maybe 9 months or 10 months. So yeah, she wasn't a hindrance. Little Ruby was not a hindrance at all. Only for the immediate weeks surrounding her birth, obviously. Moderately tired for a little bit of that, but Jenny's a diamond, my wife, so it's not a problem. She took a lot of that on, knowing a house was getting built. It's only one baby. You can manage it. It's easy.
Well, you got your hands full now, haven't you, with another one due soon?
Very exciting, yeah. No, imminent. Jenny's off work now, so she's enjoying a bit of time around the house. This is what we built it for. It's actually currently in its nicest state. There's nothing absolutely pressing to do in terms of the landscape around it. When we finished the build in June, when it was 2019, there was no driveway or anything. It was still a sort of bit of a muddy area around it, no grass or anything. But right now, everything's matured nicely, and you can just enjoy it.
Well, I was going to ask you whether, on reflection, there's anything you would say to people who are thinking of following you in this path, doing the project management. What might help?
Yeah, project management is the name for it, but you don't have to be a project manager. It's just being organized. That's all it is. And trying to think of every element. You have people to help you. Kirsty helped me. She's been through these processes before. The contractor, you'll speak to them fairly early on it. They've been through the process. So you're not on your own here. You don't have to be an expert, but I would 100% go for it. If you've got the opportunity, you can get a piece of land. We're living in something we could never have afforded to buy. Fair enough, we were lucky getting a bit of land, but there's opportunities out there, particularly if you're willing to move and things and be flexible, then you can give yourself a pretty good quality of life, I think, in terms of your living conditions, if you're willing to go for it. And as I say, I didn't find it painful at all.
Were there any areas that were confusing or that you needed to learn about? Insurances, warranties, VAT, anything that stayed hidden, or was it easy to access everything you needed and you were fairly confident from the beginning?
I'm always confident about things like that. I think if we had to go through the sort of process of borrowing money for a self-build, that was complex because we looked into it and it wasn't straightforward, and basically you need to be of a reasonable level of wealth for them to give you money. It's not any old Joe Blogs can just do off his back. You need a certain bit of back in there. So if we'd been forced down that route, we'd probably taken a bit longer. The planning was all plain to see, and again, the council do help you with that, as frustrated as you get. Architects help with the contracts with the builder. Yeah, a good architect is key. No, I don't think anything was a massive problem if you really want to do it.
Well, it's a lovely design of house as well. I'm watching Kirsty because I know that she's underway or nearly underway with her own projects, isn't she? So that's quite exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going and having a visit over there, actually, and I can go across the water and have a wee look. That'll be good fun.
Fantastic. David, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me onto your show. Thanks.
Head online to take a look at the show notes for this one. houseplanninghelp.com/303. We've got our summary there, photos of the build, the beautiful zinc cladding on the outside. If you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question, either look us up on social media. We've got the links on this page, or you can do it within the show notes. We'll link to Kirsty, the architect, as well. You can check out some of her other projects too. houseplanninghelp.com/303. Now, do you want more from House Planning Help? We obviously have our podcast archive. Definitely go through that. But we also have our membership community, The Hub. So this is where we structure the learning a bit more. There's an opportunity to chat things through with me on our office hour calls. There's our forum, so you can chat to other self-builders who are importantly tackling similar projects to what you're after as well. So that in the community. We've got a new chapter of the Long Barrow Passive House story available as well. This is Alex Baines' project. It's an earth-sheltered passive house built with insulated concrete formwork. They're doing the preliminary airtightness test, but this episode is looking at how some remedial work, particularly taping done in the proper way, because they found a few weak points, can improve the airtightness results. So quite an interesting one. Paul Jennings, air leakage expert of decades, really. He and Alex actually are co-authors of a best practice guide to airtightness. So we're in good hands here. And I think, as I remember it, this video focuses a lot on that little tool, the press fix or whatever it is, where you're going around different bits, just making sure that all of the glues on the tape have properly adhered. So that in the latest video. Check it out in the hub, houseplanninghelp.com/join if you want to become a member. That's your lot for today. Thank you so much for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.